Hi, I'm Ben. Welcome to my book corner, and I finally got to the last of my March releases to talk about. This one is Hyo the Hellmaker by Mina Ikemoto Gush. This came out on March the 14th of this year, 2024, and this is a Japanese-inspired YA fantasy novel, coming in at 532 pages long. I've not seen many people talking about this one. As of time of recording, this has under 30 ratings on Goodreads, which is a shame, as we'll see a bit later on, because this is an absolutely gorgeous book. But all that being said, as always, we're going to talk about the story, the characters, the world building, and the presentation before I give my final thoughts at the end of the video, so let's dive in. So this wasn't ultimately this book I expected it to be, and it's better for it. This is kind of a detective mystery in some regards. We're following Hyo, who is the Hellmaker, and what the Hellmaker is basically a hereditary curse that's been passed down through the family, following a god war that's covered and backed up within the text. And along with their brother Monsuku, they are tasked by going to Onogoro, which is the home of the now surviving gods, to discover whether a certain item is being grown there that can help create a specific curse, which only Onogoro has the cure for. And what you have here is, first of all, Hyo and her brother going to this new land, which they don't know, and having to interact with the gods who can tell what they are by looking at them, which is important because the gods do live amongst the people in this setting. And to meet up with a friend called June, who did visit them many years previously, only to arrive and find out that something has gone wrong with June in terms of a curse. And you have a whole detective story looking at identifying the source of bad N or unluck, for want of a better term, and figure out what's happened to June, whether this pear is actually being grown within the city, and if so, who is growing it. And also various other little side plots as they have to interact with different people and the gods. And it is a really strong mystery. You can probably guess some of the layers of this as you go, but every revelation has a secondary revelation to it, which does make sense when you take the step back and think about it. So you have the obvious and you have the less obvious connections as well. And this becomes very clear at the end of the book. This is a really strong storytelling mystery in many regards, and I enjoyed this a fair amount. It does a good job of pulling you along in terms of tension. It feels like there's consequence. You're given just enough information to make some educated guesses, which may or may not be accurate. And the red herrings that are thrown in here do also make sense. So overall, I think this is a really, really good story. Where this falls down a little bit is on the characters, and that feels like a little bit of an unfair thing to say. But I had a couple of minor issues here. The first one is to do with names, and this is just a cultural thing in terms of naming conventions. I got multiple characters mixed up because the way names are built in Japanese is very different to Western English. And it just made it, for me personally, quite difficult to attach names to characters and keep them straight throughout a lot of the story. But that's a failure on my part. But a lot of the people you meet in this didn't feel like they had a character, and rather they had roles. And this is most obviously clear with Hyo herself, who is very much driven by the curse, which does in itself make sense. And she does show some feelings of a lot of regret and dislike and empathy for those around her, but it's very, very muted, and the curse is very much the driving factor throughout all of this. In many ways, she feels like the video game protagonist, where you imprint yourself on them to give them the personality, even though they do have backstory there. Now, there are a number of other characters as well, and these are spread between normal human characters, Hyo herself, Hyo's brother Mansuku, and a few minor gods, as well as a mysterious figure that they meet that has some sort of weird connection in terms of the N that they produce and can and cannot lease to other people, which we will touch on in world building. And whilst the other characters do interact in a way that does feel natural, it does feel like there's a bit of a lack of personality overall to them. You get some good needling between Hyo and her brother, Mansuku, but past that, it just lacks a little bit of spark here and there. And part of that is due to the fact that you do have the gods here, and the gods are obviously not human, although many of them are descended or were human at some point in their lives, but centuries ago. So you almost have an uncanny valley feel at times. But that being said, the dialogue is solidly written. There is some solid banter in here as well. It just felt like the characters' depth was a little bit lacking and was more based on profession rather than actual personality. Where this does excel, though, is in world building, and this is a fascinating world to be in. There's the different types of gods, so you have two basically different types. You have the Ngiri and the En-Musabi. So the Ngiri gods are focused on cutting bad En from people, and for want of a better word, En is luck or fortune. And then the En-Musabi are about tying good luck to people. And in theory, the gods know what they're doing. In practice, it's a little bit more doubtful. Because whilst they are portrayed as gods here, I think a better example of this is some sort of magical spirits. They don't feel like they have godlike powers, but they do have a ranking system. And at the top of that ranking system are the pillar gods. And the two main ones that we meet in here are the Paddy Watcher and the Wave Walker. And the Wave Walker in particular, we spend a fair amount of time with, and they oversee certain areas. The other thing that's mentioned here is curses, and obviously, as mentioned, Hyo is a Hellmaker and can bestow custom curses on people as part of their job, for want of a better term. But gods can curse people, humans can curse people, but there are different rules, and the main rule in here is that you are meant to let people know that you've cursed them. So basically, an arbitrator can come in and negotiate the removal of the curse or recompense, basically, which is an interesting thing. And the whole point of this is the person who performed the major curse for June in this is not revealed. And there's a few different reasons for that, which do make sense within the story. And it's a case of trying to figure out who is doing what. And the other major god we meet is actually one of the Ngiri gods, is Hodamagawa, who is sort of a level down from the Wave Walker, because the minor gods do sort of fall under the management, I suppose you could call it, of some of the pillar gods as well. On top of that, you have other spirits, you have ghosts, you have the history of the world as well, which is really well fleshed out. You have the God's War, and you find out the nature of the Hellmaker's curse being something that was caused by the decision for people to look at the gods and go, we have gods of fortune and gods of misfortune, so if we kill the gods of misfortune, and gods are killable, then everyone will have good fortune all the time, not realising the effect that would potentially have on the gods of fortune, which is where the Hellmaker's curse comes from. You have them looking for the Itodaneshi pear in this, which is a cursed fruit, basically. So you can kind of think of it a little bit as Adam and Eve. And when a human eats this, one of two things will happen. If they're lucky, they will die. If they're unlucky, they'll be turned into a demon cursed with a nearly insatiable hunger, and that hunger can only be satiated via one of two things: the pear itself, so more of the pears, or human flesh. So it's basically a curse of cannibalism in many regards. And where Hyo came from, the curse of the village where they lived was such that this was a repeating cycle of the villagers cursed with this hunger and them having to try and manage this. And that plays into some of Hyo's backstory as well. And it's a really interesting sort of background feature, and is overall the main mystery in many regards of the story, even though it's on the back burner for a lot of it. And it does play into this very, very well. You also have events which Hyo and her brother are not aware of that have occurred specifically in Onogoro, which informs some of the characters and some of the different things that the gods do. Now, on top of all that, you do also have the idea of En being good and bad. And En can become tainted, and this is an important point that really does come through. And that taint can be accumulated by, for example, from curses, or from cursing people for what you think is a good reason, but it isn't, or not protecting your followers, or any other number of things. And this is on the run up to a time of year when there's a special ritual to burn off any excess taints. Now, the problem you have with this is as taint builds up with the gods, and that sort of spills into the atmosphere. So they do have taint detectors that detect where there might be atmospheric anomalies caused by a buildup of negative tane. And this is shown very early on with basically a rain of fish guts, and that becomes more and more prevalent as the story unfolds as well. And it makes this a really engaging, deep world to be in, and it's absolutely fascinating to read through, and is possibly the strongest point of the book in total is the world itself. Well, that fetches me to presentation. So I said at the start of the video that this is a beautiful book, and I really do mean that. But before we get on to that, this is solidly paced. It doesn't have any major peaks and troughs. It has a gradual build-up as it works through, as it builds upon its blocks, as we begin to find mystery after mystery and start to unfold those. And that is really well done. Part of my issue is this is the first time I think that I've read any Eastern-inspired fantasy. So, whereas the fantasy I normally read, I know a lot of the touchstones already and I'm familiar with them, this became a little bit harder because I don't know some of the inspirations as well. And in many ways, that made it more interesting for me, but it did make it a lot harder at times, especially as there is use of a lot of Japanese terminology in here. It also uses Japanese calligraphy. Is that the correct word? I'm not sure. And Japanese lettering and words in format as well throughout the story at multiple points. And on top of that as well, this book uses art really, really well. The best way I can describe the art in this is manga style. There is quite a bit in here. I've got a few different options that I have kept things for. So we'll start off with like a map of Onogoro, and it's like that's like third or fourth page in. Absolutely gorgeous. But then even like various different pages within the book, you have artwork that just shows off some of the characters that you're meeting along the way. Oh, this is really, really awkward doing it this way. Or you have like your full page spreads like that, just giving you an idea of sort of, for want of a better word, the sort of action scenes that are going on. And I do really like the various different points in the book where you go and switch to an all black page with the white writing instead. So like a reverse of your normal text effects that you'd normally have. And that's all the way through the book. And it is absolutely beautiful. Also, the cover itself, you have a little bit of shine on the actual title itself, and also some of the swooshes that go around, sort of showing the magical effects, and also some ribbons and stuff like that. And I absolutely adore this. The material of the book is odd. It feels a lot more papery, which sounds like a weird thing to say, but the paper feels very different to most other novels, and I don't know quite what it is. And even like the cover doesn't have any sort of that sort of wax sheen you quite often get, or that plasticky feel you often get with books now. But yeah, it's just absolutely beautiful as books go. It is very well written. As already mentioned, the pacing is good. The story beats hit at the right time, but it is really elevated by the artwork through this, which is part of the reason why I'm surprised so few people are talking about it. This is probably the best presented book that I've read this year so far. So I want people to check this out. I think for the amount of work that's clearly gone into this, this is an absolutely beautiful book that I would like more people to see. As already mentioned, under 30 ratings right now on Goodreads, I give this a 4.25 stars out of 5. It's a well-done mystery, and as not a massive fan of mysteries in general, I still really enjoyed this, and I thought it was a really strong mystery story going on here, which linked in really well as the world was also unveiled as well, and the world building is absolutely phenomenal. You have a great deal of world history and lore built into this in a way that does not feel like it's exposition heavy, as it often is in other texts. Cough, cough, Akatar. On top of that, it is a gorgeous book with really good use of art throughout to sort of drive home the imagery that's on the pages. The only negative with this is some of the character work itself. I do feel like that was lacking some depth in places, but on saying that, the interaction between the characters is really well done. It was just the actual personality that sometimes felt a little bit lacking for me. So I give this a 4.25 stars out of 5. is my thoughts on Hyo the Hellmaker. Have you seen this book doing the rounds? If you have, let me know in the comments below. I'll catch you all soon.